Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dr. Mumia Osaji from Department of Literature, University of Nairobi. I welcome you warmly to this twin seminar and webinar. And we are discussing the Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o Kamirithu theater. And the topic for our discussion is the theater as decolonization, Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o's Kamirithu and its afterlives. We are going to have a panel discussion, and the panel presenters, some are here, some are online. So I'll give you a sneak preview of the panelists who will be presenting their views on this topic. The first speaker is Professor Kenny Koppers from the University of Basel in Switzerland. Incidentally, the University of Basel in Switzerland and the University of Nairobi are co-partners in this research presentation. So Professor Koppers is a professor of history and theory of architecture. He is the founder of the Center for Urban Studies at the University of Basel. His research areas include urban research, critical urbanism, architecture itself, infrastructure, and geopolitics. Currently, Professor Koppers is undertaking a study on the LAPSET project in East Africa. The second speaker in this panel is Dr. Makau Kitata. Dr. Kitata is a lecturer in the Department of Literature at this university. His research areas include literature and infrastructure, literature and mobility, narrative analysis, theories of literature, and currently, Dr. Kitata is engaged in urban spaces, politics, and literature. Our third panelist is Professor Wangui Wagoro. Professor Wangui Wagoro is well renowned as a translator and also as a researcher in translation. She's currently based at the School of Oriental and African Studies, SOAS in London. She's also a visiting professor at the King's College, London. We know her as not only a translator, but also as an activist, a curator, and a human rights defender, as well as a poet and a writer. We also have in this panel, James Kithiga. James Kithiga is an actor. He was a lead actor acting as Gikunda in Ngaahika Ndeenda, that is, I will marry when I want. Then we have another panelist, Brian Mathenge. Brian is an activist based at the Social Justice Center. Then we have Dr. Joy Mboya. Dr. Joy Mboya is renowned as the founder and also the current executive director of GoDown Arts Center, which is based here in Nairobi. She is a curator, a performer, a cultural activist. She has also research interests in the notion of space and identity, the notion of Nairobi as a space. She has been a visiting professor at Gildersville, a Gildersville professor at Barnard College at the University of Columbia in the USA. Finally, we have in this panel, Mutanu Kyany'a. Mutanu Kyany'a is an activist based at the African digital space. So I am warmly welcoming you to listen to this heavyweight panel. And after that, we shall open it up for both online and physical engagement. I will proceed by opening the space up for Professor Kupas. Welcome, Professor. Before Professor Kupas comes in, ladies and gentlemen, kindly hold your hands for Dr. Miriam Musonye. Dr. Miriam Musonye is the head of the Department of Literature, and she's here wearing 3 hats. One, she's representing the department as the head of the department. Secondly, she is also a representative of the Dean Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences. And finally, she is representing the Vice Chancellor. So she will speak in 3, and I don't know if I can call them wearing 3 hats. Yeah. Yes, please, welcome.
Thank you very much. And before you start panicking, I don't have speeches from all those people who have been mentioned. But I would like to say you're welcome to the University of Nairobi. I'm sure that is what the Vice Chancellor would have said. And I welcome you to the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, where we belong. The Dean should have been here, but he just told me that he had another urgent meeting which he couldn't delegate. So please receive his apologies, but feel welcome. Now, I was given 5 minutes. So let me read what I have to say so that I don't digress. Is that okay? History. In 2020, I was in a conference organized by Professor Kenny Kupas, where I and a colleague from Humboldt University presented a paper on colonial roads in the works of Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o. Thereafter, Kenny reached out to me seeking a collaboration on a theater and decolonization project focusing on Ngũgĩ's Kamirithu experience. I was not in a position to engage at the time, and so I linked him up with Dr. Makau Kitata, my colleague in the Department of Literature. And as they say, the rest is history. That's why we are here. The project took off and expanded to include even more participants who are here today. Today, we get a taste of this combined research and of these 2 scholars, and also to hear what direction the research is now taking. Today is also a milestone for us in the Department of Literature because through this project, we are pushing the decolonization agenda in many ways, but most importantly, in bringing together the academy as represented by Basel and University of Nairobi, the industry represented by GoDown and the African Digital Heritage, and traveling theater for social justice, and the community as represented by Kamirithu performers. And I'm very proud to have these people here. And I would like to welcome all of you to this public event. It's really something that is making me very happy. And I think it will be really worth our time. Kejuge kaundu kamwe na Gikuyu. Ati ndamunyita ugeni muno kuma kuria Limuru na ndauga nĩ mwĩkĩte wega muno nĩ ũndũ wa gũtũhe gĩtĩo gwĩtwo na gwĩtĩka na gũka gũikarania na ithuĩ. Tũthomaga ũhoro wanyu mabuku-inĩ na kwĩna arutwo aingĩ haha mathomaga maiguaga kwathiĩ kwahana atĩa na rĩu nĩ makũmuona. Ũcio nĩ ũndũ mũnene mũno na twakena mũno. Haya, ndakĩmũcokeria ngatho na ndauga nĩ wega. So welcome. I now invite Kenny to come and take over.
All right, thank you so much. And I'm going to bring up Makau Kitata right away. And we will start by thanking you so much for being here. It's really wonderful to see these faces, these people that we've been working with in the audience. And I hope you'll have the chance also to speak up at the end of the presentations that follow.
Thank you very much, Kenny. Thank you very much, Miriam. I would start by thanking the actors from Kamirithu because you are the people who started what we are doing today. I will not mention everyone by name, though I know all your names. But I would like to mention someone in particular, Shoro Amoiruri, who is not amongst us, because when we started going to Kamirithu to do research, we realized that we had to get permission from Shoro Amoiruri to talk to anybody who was involved in this play, Ngaahika Ndeenda. I want to thank the university for giving me the opportunity to go and do that research in Kamirithu. And I also want to thank Gitonga Mwangi, who did a very good job at recording the narratives and life stories of the people of Kamirithu during that research. And I'm also thanking the other interlocutors today who have come to this presentation. Lastly, I will not forget to thank the University of Nairobi for hosting this very important event. So I will start by telling you something about the village of Kamirithu. The village of Kamirithu has become famous because of the work of the famous novelist, playwright, and literary scholar, whom we know, Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o, who grew up there in Kamirithu. So his 1977 play, Ngaahika Ndeenda, I Will Marry When I Want, which he co-authored with fellow playwright and social worker, Ngũgĩ wa Mirii, was produced in close collaboration with the villagers, many of whom were landless peasants and workers in the nearby tea plantations and factory. And some of them are here today. So the play denounced the injustice experienced by the villagers resulting not only from their forced resettlement in Kamirithu and dispossession during the colonial period, but also from the continued exploitation after Kenya's formal independence from Britain in 1963. The villagers' life stories provided much of the script of the play, and their performances drew thousands of people who traveled from all over Kenya, as we know. Soon after its construction, however, the theater was demolished by the Kenyan government because of the revolutionary content of the play. So, Kenny, you may take over.
All right. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about the context of our research, and will be about 20 minutes. And we'll also show you some video clips of the actors and the community we've been working with. So this project started in 2020 as part of a Swiss government-funded research project called Governing Through Design. And our aim with this project was to better understand decolonization in the built environment through the lens of the Kamirithu story. Since then, we have had the opportunity and also the great pleasure to get to know the people who were the force behind this theater, and many of whom are sitting here today. And together with filmmaker Gitonga Mwangi, we organized several group meetings with the community, and then conducted individual interviews with the actors. And these life story interviews give a deep sense of people's relationship with the land, their family histories of migration, and their experiences of injustice. And they have helped us to understand why people joined the theater to begin with, how it became so enormously successful, and what happened after the theater was banned and demolished. Here, I'll just show you two short clips that give you a sense of these interviews. The first with Wangari Wahinga.
ndakwira niĩ ndereirwo makwa mathĩtĩra rĩu gũcoka kuma kũu ũkombo-inĩ ũcio wothe twoka ũkombo-inĩ kũngĩ gũkũ
rĩrĩa aciari matirĩ mũgũnda twarĩ gĩcagi twoka ũguo twĩmana kũu rũgũrũ kũrĩa ndacokire kwĩmenyera ndemenyire twĩ kwene tũhetwo wako nĩ andũ a maneighbor cia ũguo cicoka kũrĩma marĩmaga matiarĩ na wĩra ũngĩ marĩ arĩmi na kũrĩithia ũguo.
We're now working on a digital archive with these interviews to make these voices public, thereby honoring our promise to the community that this is made to be public. We're also working on a documentary film and with other stakeholders, including also the director of the Polytechnic that was built on the site of the theater, as you will hear more about later. We are envisioning a project to rebuild part of the theater on the site and to reactivate cultural performances for the Kamirithu community. And this very much also together with some of the people that you will hear speaking today. So the people here are crucial partners in these efforts, and they are not only about celebrating, we believe, a heritage, an important piece of Kenyan heritage, but also exploring new ways in which we can address issues of social and environmental justice in Kenya today. Now follows a little bit of history. The village of Kamirithu is located in the semi-rural district of Limuru in the heart of what was once called the White Highlands. This part of Kenya is the ancestral homeland of predominantly Kikuyu communities. Many of these communities were dispossessed by British colonizers to make space for tea and coffee plantations and lavish homes following the construction of the colonial railway in the late 19th century. Kamirithu was established by the colonial regime in response to the anti-colonial uprising led by the Kenya Land and Freedom Army during the early 1950s. British armed forces rounded up people and contained them in tightly controlled camps that were dispersed over the central Kenyan countryside. Next image. Okay, here you see the railway and the factory. The area around Kamirithu was marred by colonialism long before the construction of these concentration camps. The nearby railway station of Limuru became an important node of the plantation economy that developed in the first half of the 20th century. And much of the world-famous tea and coffee of the region was shipped through this station here on the left. So it became an ideal location for the establishment of factories, and the Bata Shoe Company was one of the first such factories that was built in 1938. European historians have celebrated the Bata Company, a multinational company, as a kind of progressive employer. And it is true that Bata did build company towns in the Czech Republic and Canada and elsewhere, and they're celebrated as marvels of modern urbanism, of modern factory production. The Bata facilities in Limuru, however, were at the same time were equipped with housing for some employees and with some amenities like a sports ground and a social club. But these were not available to many of the casual workers who constituted a significant proportion of the labor force. And many of these laborers, of these workers, came from forced resettlement villages like Kamirithu. And what is more, they suffered sometimes lethal pollution from the chemical work in the factory, as Ngũgĩ explained to us in an interview that I'm just showing you next.
Thito kuria chemical icio ciaigagwo Africans arĩa marĩ kũu makandĩkwo andũ mekũhatĩrĩria andũ ao na wathiĩ kuuga atĩ take him down kuambiwa hivyo ni ũthiĩ kwa personnel ũkore ũrĩ ũkũ-discipline nĩ twahatĩrĩirio mũno. O hwaĩ mami angiaumire kũrĩa aikaraga oke gũkũ no arĩkaya akauga athiĩ gwĩteithia agĩcoka tarĩu karuhuo kau ũguo karoka aroka akiugaga mũikaraga atĩa gũkũ mũtigua mũnungo ũyũ na nĩ mũnungo ũcio nĩ ũtũmĩte andũ aingĩ o mathiĩ thibitarĩ makerwo magucĩtie kĩndũ gĩtarĩ kĩega.
For those who understand Kikuyu, I think this would have been fine. For others, what Kithiga was saying was to explain how there were internal hierarchies in the company that made it so that African workers were forced to betray and to discipline people who were casual workers in the same factory, and that the factory also included very polluting processes that many of the casual workers in particular were experiencing, and experienced sometimes lethal pollution as a result. All right, the site of Kamirithu was originally inhabited and cultivated by Kikuyu families. And here Clement Warora Kimani explains to us that Kamirithu actually owes its name to the nearby swamp. In the course of the British colonial war, these families were dispossessed to make space for one of the many forced resettlement villages and detention camps that dot this region. Kamirithu was one of these villages, and here you see a recent land ownership map from the archive of Kiambu, that shows you the kind of plots laid out in Kamirithu over time. The original layout is difficult to see, but we can see that every plot is roughly the same size, and there is an open space at the center of the village. This is where the theater was located. The British had left this open space as a kind of village green, a kind of community area that would provide minimal amenities in the otherwise bare camps. People in Kamirithu refer to this space as the social hall, using the English word, and they use it for community gatherings in the years after Kenya's independence. On the one hand of this open space was a wooden structure, likely built by the British. That's not so clear, but in this shack, you see it at the back, where this building, there was a community educational cultural center that was established there that offered literacy classes primarily to the women of the village. It was a local government official, Mrs. Amoni, and Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o himself refers to this also in his books, talking about the experience of Kamirithu. A local official who informed Ngũgĩ in 1976 that this piece of community land could be grabbed at any moment and therefore should better be claimed for permanent community use. And together with Ngũgĩ wa Mirii, they conceived of the establishment of a theater on the site as a collaborative process of construction that would involve the villagers. And in the next clip, next image, George explains the kind of philosophy behind this open air theater.
Vieta vile inakuwa na kitu inaitwa murangi wega ka step haha kage haha thiethe kĩingĩha ũguo na andũ magĩũka na makaihũra nginya magatingiara nĩ ithuĩ twakĩte yo thieta.
George is explaining here is the kind of construction of the theater as something very collaborative, something very open, and the openness of the space was really part of its success. So in contrast with bourgeois theater performances in Kenya's National Theater, very close to here, Kamirithu's open air theater design imbued a sense of openness, of freedom, and the proximity of the players to the audience and also to the surrounding environment. And this really very much in contrast probably to the prison-like working conditions in the factory as well as the tea plantations. So in this context, the actors were able to act out their own conditions of exploitation. And Makau will tell you more about that now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Kenny. I'll talk about the play. The play directly addressed the exploitative conditions of the local agricultural manufacturing industry, epitomized by the Butter Shoe Company and the nearby plantations. So it effectively showed, that is the play, it showed ordinary Kenyans not only the conditions of their exploitation, but also gave them role models for defiance and revolutionary action against what they experienced as an oppressive system, not much different from British colonial rule. In the words of Lucy Wangui, that was like present-day slavery. So we'll watch a clip by Lucy explaining how their environment connected with the play.
Bata ũguo yakirwo onayo rĩ nditayo tũragwo ĩrĩ o koloni tondũ ona gwakwo ti atĩ nĩ yakwo ũrĩa mabacĩrĩ makagwo ĩgĩtuĩke atĩ kuma ũkoloni hĩndĩ ĩyo yakĩrĩ ũkoloni na rĩu atĩ nĩ ũkĩte ũndũ wa kĩrĩu tondũ ona ũmũthĩ ũrĩ o ũkoloni nĩ ũkomborwo tondũ wĩna mĩaka makĩria ya 20 na ndũrĩ wandĩkwo permanent wĩkaci ndio ndakimenya kacho ni kuga ate ndũngĩtiga kiwane o juma kana kimane ũrĩa waneyo ugo no ikono uko no ukombono muthi.
What Lucy is saying in that clip is that whatever is happening in our environment at the time when they were playing Ngaahika Ndeenda was not much different from days of colonialism. And so we are saying that the play was helping these people, the community in Kamirithu, to regain their humanity. So the villagers needed to stand up and boycott wage labor, so the play suggested. That is in fact exactly as they did. Factory workers in the Limuru district had organized multiple labor strikes during the 1960s and 70s. So the play conveyed existing experiences of injustice and served as a public indictment of those looting the wealth of the nation left behind by British colonialists in the hands of an irresponsible elite who sought to continue exercising their economic interests through proxies. 16. So the contemporary built environment of Limuru district continues to reflect economic disparities. Adjacent to the Kamirithu settlement, one can still find the same tea plantations. The landscape of the district is divided into two opposite realms, separated by the colonial railway. On the one hand, a sector in which those dispossessed of their land are piled up on top of each other. On the other hand, a sector of tarmacked roads, well-watered crops, and lavish plantation homes. And running along the now defunct railway, which delivered tea and butter shoes to Nairobi and beyond, is the Nairobi-Nakuru Road, part of the Trans-African Highway, which Kenyatta's regime presented as an instrument of Pan-African integration. So despite its dreams of African development and mobility, as Kenny Coopers and Prita Meyer have analyzed elsewhere, the highway entrenches the segregated structure of Limuru, revealing the endurance and renewal of colonial relations of power. So every day, workers cross this spatial divide on their way to work and back. And this post-colonial spatial condition is also expressed in the play, Ngaahika Ndeenda. Wangeshi, the wife of Kigonda, remarks that the son of the rich Kioi, John Muhuni, comes to pick up Gathoni, Kigonda's daughter, but never enters the house. He just stays in his car on the road. And this conveys the players' awareness of how infrastructure structures their relation to power. So drawing relations between the built environment of Limuru district and the performance space of Ngaahika Ndeenda is a way to make legible the forces that define the lives of Kamirithu, and by extension, the lives of many ordinary Kenyans. It gives a sense of the social and environmental injustices which the Kamirithu Community Center sought to contest. So, after the government prohibited the performance of Ngaahika Ndeenda and imprisoned Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o without trial in 1977, the Kamirithu Community Education and Cultural Center stood empty for several years. Yet by 1982, the theater group had regrouped and prepared the performance of a new play by Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o called Maito Jogera, Mother Sing for Me. This time at the National Theatre in Nairobi, and some of the rehearsals were done at the ED2, University of Nairobi. Shortly before the performances were to take place, however, the government withdrew the performance license and soon after ordered the demolition of the open-air theatre at Kamirithu village. Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o and Ngũgĩ wa Mirii went into exile. On the site of the demolished open-air theatre, the government erected a polytechnic. This provided educational opportunities, but it also effectively silenced the community and effaced the Kamirithu theatre experience. And since the 1970s, Kamirithu village has become increasingly densely and informally built. There are many structures around the polytechnic, speaking of the enduring legacies of injustice. So the scarcity of land in the village is an enduring consequence of colonial and post-colonial dispossession. In fact, the site of the former theater also housed some squatter homes. But after the demolition of the theater, the government moved some of these quarters. Some were taken to Mboya, while others moved to nearby spaces reserved for roads and were joined by other migrants. So the contemporary village of Kamirithu today is strewn with semi-permanent iron sheet structures on road reserves and otherwise unclaimed land. These structures form a large part of Kamirithu housing environment, which residents of Kamirithu refer to as shauri yako. In Kiswahili, it is up to you. That is the name of housing in Kamirithu. 18. At the same time, Kamirithu has witnessed the emergence of new economic activities and forms of sociability. Much of this is due to the Trans-Africa Highway, which does not only play a segregative role, but also an economically generative one. Kamirithu is now known nationally as a key spot for truck repair, and the local Juakali Association of Small Businesses, has been a fast-growing engine of development and employment for the surrounding area. So as such, the highway has turned Kamirithu into a cosmopolitan yet still semi-rural node. And its inhabitants now hail from across the country and from as far as Burundi, Uganda, and even the DRC. Now, to conclude our analysis, our analysis has shown not only how villagers responded to forced resettlement and other forms of colonial violence, but also how they addressed and overcame enduring legacies of injustice that continue to shape their everyday lives and imaginations of a better future. The open-air theater at the heart of the village symbolizes this role of the community through the creation of a different spatial order that is a collectively built relational space that brought the theater and awareness into the community, and in doing so, undid some of the repercussions of villagization. I'll conclude by showing you a clip by one of our interviewees who was also an actor in the play Ngaahika Ndeenda, a clip by Mwangi.
Thako riu riarĩ rĩega tondũ rĩaheire ũgĩ mũingĩ mũno tondũ ona rĩu ũguo nĩ ndungaga nyĩmbo, ndĩna nyĩmbo ta 6 ndungĩte na ũgĩ ũcio ndutĩte o hau, na korwo no mũthikĩrie ona no ngĩine rũmwe rwakwa tondũ rũtoranĩte na ithako, rwĩtagwo mbara yarĩ nene. Ndirikanaga mbara ĩrĩa yarĩ nene, ĩrĩa aciari aitũ mahũragwo makĩrũĩra tĩri tũkona thayũ, Nyabongo na ngati nĩguo mũimbo ũrĩa muma, Nyabongo na ngati nĩguo mũimbo ũrĩa muma, Nyabongo na ngati nĩguo mũimbo ũrĩa muma, makĩnyitana ũrũmwe makĩnyua muma, na makĩhĩta ũmwe witũ kagarũrũka, rũrĩo nĩ muma ũyũ wa mũingĩ witũ, na thakame ya thĩnia Kenya macokerere, na thakame ya thĩnia Kenya macokerere, ona mehĩta mao makĩgarũrũka, magĩtuĩka tũkũnia tũkwendia arĩa angĩ, nĩkĩo mũronaga marakuagwo ũmwe kwa ũmwe, tondũ muma ũcio no nginya magarũrũke, tondũ muma ũcio no nginya magarũrũke, tondũ muma ũcio no nginya magarũrũke. Ndirikanaga njamba ĩrĩa itũ Kĩmathi, ũrĩa arũire na thũngũ hamwe na ngati, anyitwo mũcinga wa tabũrũbũrũ, mamũtwara igoti-inĩ atuĩrĩirwo gũkua, mamũtwara igoti-inĩ atuĩrĩirwo gũkua, mamũtwara igoti-inĩ atuĩrĩirwo gũkua, gũkĩũria mwega witũ akoima nakũ, tondũ nĩma nĩtwoimire kwa Ngũgĩ, na tũgĩcoka tũgĩthiĩ kwa Njũgũmeria, na tũcokire mũtitũ tũrũe rĩngĩ, na tũcokire mũtitũ tũrũe rĩngĩ, na tũcokire mũtitũ tũrũe rĩngĩ, barĩ yakunda ngũtũme.
One of the actors from the original Kamirithu Cursed, singing about revolution, singing about the memory of freedom fighting, and asking those who might not be courageous enough to join in the spirit of revolution even today. And it is a direct product of the spirit that was ignited by the play Ngaahika Ndeenda, which continues to endure and to flourish in Kamirithu today. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your patience in staying with us despite the technical challenges, and I hope the translations or the paraphrasing of the subtitles somehow worked for those not Kikuyu speaking. We'll now have the other remaining presentations and then open for discussion. Thank you.
Okay, so I think you have my presentation over there. Yeah, maybe I should have, I've got 10 minutes, but to start very quickly by thanking Kenny and Makau for getting in touch with the GoDown and eliciting our interest in what they've been doing and trying to see whether there can be collaboration and synergy between what is happening at the GoDown Arts Center, and the project that they have embarked on as well. The GoDown Arts Center, for those who don't know, is a 20-year-old institution that is based in the industrial area in Nairobi. It is a site of creative development for artists, but I think more recently, of course, as we have begun to embed ourselves in community in Nairobi, we are finding that the role of infrastructure can be a lot richer and a lot deeper and a lot bigger than simply serving artists and the arts. And so some of what I will be sharing briefly will highlight that. But specifically, I'd like to sort of respond to the Kamirithu project and begin to think about how these two things are connected. I've sort of tried to title this from Kamirithu to the GoDown, following the red thread, the continuous sort of core impulse that might exist between what Ngũgĩ was doing and what is happening now. And in my view, and I think in the view of the GoDown, it is really this progression of trying to get to this state of self-emergence, of self-determination, the process of nation-making, the process of community building, the process of city-making, depending on which level we are looking at. So if we can go to the next slide. We locate ourselves, I think, in this idea of what culture represents within a Pan-African context, but also within the Kenya context. I think that when Kamirithu and Ngũgĩ and his collaborators were engaging, perhaps they were aware of this particular manifesto, the Pan-African Cultural Manifesto, 1969, that basically synthesized and summarized the role of culture in pushing for the freedom and the independence of the entire continent. And I think that if you can access this, these are very powerful words that in our view have sort of fallen between the cracks as we make nations on the continent today. And one of our interests as a GoDown is to try and see how to close those cracks and to get to this particular statement that sits in the Kenya Constitution, the current Kenya Constitution, that culture really is the foundation of the nation, that we make ourselves from that matrix, from that seedbed of culture. Okay, so the way that the GoDown has been working with that, of course, is similarly to the interest of Kamirithu, was to bring community in. And I'll move to the next slide kindly. Because we recognize that people really are an important resource for recreating and creating the kind of future that we want. And that I know today we talk about a bottom-up agenda, and I'm saying this is with tongue in cheek, but bottom-up is really something that I think is essential to the way that community should form and must form, because every individual has something to contribute. And so community actors as resources of knowledge and capacity is what we lean on as we do our work, particularly in the redevelopment of the GoDown Arts Center, because the GoDown is recreating itself, redeveloping itself into a new physical space, a new cultural infrastructure. Okay, and how do we do this? I'll just move to the next slide kindly. Yeah. So this next slide, I think perhaps that statement that came from an elder in Kibra is part of the genesis of our own agenda as the GoDown in trying to see how we begin to work with community and work in community and be a part of community. This particular elder said that the community becomes confident when it is recognized. And for those who are familiar with the history of the Nubians in Nairobi, of course, you know that they sit on the margins, on the fringes of citizenship within this country for a long time, not recognized, not given IDs, really on the fringes. And so this particular gentleman said that if you recognize us, we become confident in ourselves, in our identities and who we are. And we picked up on that phrase to begin to see how to mobilize the community of Nairobi, which is diverse and which sits in many different neighborhoods around the city, to try and see how we can draw out that idea of identity and confidence by engaging and co-creating with community through festivals. And this was one of the first ways in which we began to understand how do we engage and draw in community participation in the making of the city and the making of the nation, and ultimately the redevelopment of the GoDown Arts Center. If we go into the next slide, I'll just show some of the ways in which we have begun to do that. So I think one of the things that we have sort of said is, in which spaces and places can community participate? Yeah. So if we look at Kamirithu, of course, that was very particular. It was theater. It was that space of the stage. And what we find now, many, many years later, is that there is an expanded space for community engagement, still through culture, still under the lens of culture, that we can leverage. And so some of those, of course, are to do with city making, urban planning, neighborhood planning. How does community participate in that particular question? Also, how does community participate in the framework that basically these plans are built on, which is policy and legislation? How do they also lend their voice and their ideas and their vision into those spaces? And then, of course, public purpose projects are projects that are supposed to be for the common good. And again, how does community begin to engage in those spaces? Okay, we'll look at the next slide, please. So we've done that in a number of different ways. I mean, in looking at the rebuilding of the GoDown, this set of slides over here is working with ordinary Nairobi residents to assess the situation, to assess whether it's the neighborhood, the street, but even the larger city, in order to begin to understand what it will mean to redevelop an arts center or to redevelop a neighborhood. So whether these are assessments that are a little bit formal, working with tools that help to provoke and expand the ideation that can come from community members, whether it is through physical walkthroughs, you move through the neighborhood, you record things that you see and propose things that you think would be important changes. Of course, working together with policymakers and duty bearers, what are those spaces of joint sharing? And often those are workshop spaces. And then, of course, in the creative space, what are those spaces again? And the festival framework is a very powerful framework, curating together, co-creating together, identifying the cultural assets of the city together. If we can move to the next slide. And then I think specifically with the authority, because I think it's interesting to hear that in Kamirithu, of course, that open space is now taken by the Polytechnic. And there is now an effort to try and collaborate and speak with the Polytechnic and agree together with the Polytechnic the vision of this space moving forward. So that engagement with either the local duty bearers, local authority becomes very important. With the GoDown, we found that seeing things together is important. Going somewhere and doing and seeing things together is important. Joint study visits. Engaging the policy conversation together is important. And then actually developing some projects together is also important. This was a public square in Nairobi. This is where the Mboya statue sits. And there was an effort between ourselves and the county to begin to see how to create a square out of that area. So there are many ways now, I think, expanded ways in which, if you're looking at self-determination and bringing community in, that the space is richer and riper and more open to being able to engage community in many, many different ways. I think a little bit different from when Ngũgĩ and the thespians and the actors were trying to drive for change in the 70s. We go to the next slides. So these just very quickly to show you what some of those are that have happened with community. Local tours that are devised with the community. And of course, these tours are spaces and places of exploration, of people understanding the history that they find, but also a chance to find new histories, because we've now inhabited the city for a while. And how do those stories and our own inhabitation of the city begin to form some of the histories moving forward? So doing this through tours and through saying this primary school is important for this reason, or this particular street is important for this reason, or this open space is where the first such and such happened, or that mzee is the one who holds the history of this neighborhood in his head. All of these things are part of this idea of working through tours or a tour framework to begin to unearth the histories of community today. You can go to the next one. Dialogues are always important. Conversation, being able to share, being able to use voice, being able to exchange experience and ideas. And again, that's a tool that the GoDown has used quite well and continues to use quite a bit. And then the next one, very quickly, if we can share that. I think one of the things that you begin to find within communities that there's a rhythm, there's a calendar of things that happen at particular points in community. So again, how do you work with those? How do you insert yourself in those spaces and those opportunities within the calendar to begin to see how to find the space for co-creation? Nairobi is beginning to devolve or develop an urban calendar. October has become very significant in Nairobi because, of course, it is the global urban moment. And this particular activity, which is the drum circle, is one that is not an activity of the GoDown, but one that GoDown has collaborated in, that happens during the placemaking week in Urban October, but has now become a monthly activity of the CBD. So again, beginning to reshape that wider community space through its calendar, its rhythm, its annual rhythm. And then if we can go to the next slides. So just to very quickly show you, so this is the new GoDown Arts Center that is about to, which already being built, excavation has started. But the way that this has been conceived, of course, is through those participatory processes of engaging community, starting first by trying to understand the macro space of the city through city festivals, and then eventually coming down to conversations within this neighborhood around how do we change the streets? How do we include women in the streets, people with disability, children, the street vendors themselves? How do you have a more collaborative understanding between the premised businesses and the street businesses? And then how does this public space become something that anybody feels that they can walk into because it is theirs, because they have been part of the ideation, they've been part of visualizing it. So this role of cultural infrastructure then for us is very interesting when we think about Kamirithu in terms of what it can do in a more ripple effect way, that it is not just the building, but what has happened with that building? What are the impacts that have happened in that process of trying to understand the space at all of the layers, from city to neighborhood to street, and what has that done to people? What has that done to people, to community in particular? And if we move to the next slide. So you can see that the new GoDown, of course, is both the building and the streets. And so with the building, there's been various stakeholder activities, walkthrough studies, workshops, again, including a whole range and diversity of individuals, whether they were academics, whether they were residents of Nairobi, whether they were artists, whether they were people who worked within the GoDown, whether they're the neighboring premises, the street vendors, and so on, as we've indicated. And then, of course, the street itself, again, engaging a particular core group, which is women, to help assess and analyze the challenges of the street and to help ideate with specialists, the planners and the architects, on how to begin to change the space. The impact of that, I think for us, one is that in working in this inclusive way, we are finding that there is a way in which you can mobilize citizens to action. You can engage them in a way that they feel that their views are respected, that their views are valid, that their views are important, no matter who it's coming from. Whether it's a child who paints their expression of the change they want to see, whether it's a woman street vendor, whether it is a policymaker, whether it is a student at the university, whether it is an architect or a planner. So mobilizing citizens to action is one of the impacts that we're seeing in this process that we have been a part of for actually a decade. Building agency, people begin to feel that actually they can drive change, and that change will come when they participate and when they act as well. So this is particularly, I think, great to see, because we see with the festival that some of the neighborhoods have taken that framework into doing their own activities quite separately from the Ngũgĩ festival itself. So finding a tool or a framework that they can then use to engage within their own space. But then also that there are neighborhood exchanges that are now happening across Nairobi, where Mukuru wants to visit Isli, where Kilimani wants to go to Korogosho, and there is a cross exchange across very disparate and different neighborhoods. Strengthening citizen commitment and participation, of course. comes out of those first 2 points. And then strengthening collaborative practice. I think that there was something that you said, I think it was Makau when you started. And I just noted that basically what we're doing here is creating these circles of cooperation and collaboration in different ways. And it's a question of who is in the circle at any particular point in time. And the collaborative practice then really becomes a very strong way of building things that you then know have ownership, have buy-in, and therefore hopefully sustainability. And then most importantly, of course, bridging these gaps that we have between policy and practice, between academia and practice. So these are just some of the things that we have been seeing. And there you go. Last slide, a smile for you. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
We want to welcome Professor Wagoro to make her presentation. Professor Wagoro is online. So Professor, you're welcome. I've just written you a text message and you've confirmed that you are on standby. Please welcome. Thank you.
Can you see me?
Can see you, Prof.
Okay, thank you. Ninashukuru sana kuwa na nyinyi, niko mbali, lakini nina furaha sana kuwa na nyinyi. Kwamba ningeanza kuwashukuru wametualika, the Vice Chancellor of the University, the Dean, and Professor Miriam Musonya, na pia Kenny Coopers and Kitata for welcoming me to be part of this research group as a translator. Now, ningependa tena kuwasalimia wazazi wetu kwa lugha yetu ya Kikuyu, kwa sababu mimi ninaiongea, lakini si kuwa zile lugha zingine za nchi yetu hazina maana, lakini hiyo ndio lugha ninalozungumza na mnasikia Kiswahili changu si kisanifu sana. Andũ a Kamirithu no nyende kũmũgeithia na ngeithi cia kũraya na kũmũcokeria ngatho mũno nĩ ũndũ wa wĩra ũcio mũrutĩte kuma mĩaka ĩyo makĩria ma 47 kuma rĩrĩa mwambĩrĩirie kũruta wĩra ũcio wa Kamirithu, na nĩ wĩra ũteithĩtie gũcenjia muonere wa maũndũ ma ũrĩa thikũ icio cia gĩkoroni ciakoragwo na kũhota kũrora bũrũri witũ na njĩra ĩngĩ ĩrĩa tũtangĩahotire kũmĩrora korwo mũtiarutire wĩra ũcio. Niĩ mwene ndingĩhota gũkorwo ndĩ university ngĩmwarĩria na rũthiomi rwitũ nĩ ũrĩa tũreretwo kwaria thiomi cia kĩgeni macukuru-inĩ maya tũthomagĩra na tũthomithanagĩrio. Koguo ũmũthĩ nĩ mũthenya wakwa wa mbere maica-inĩ makwa mothe kwaria cukuru nene ya university ya bũrũri witũ na rũthiomi rũrĩa njiarĩtwo naruo na rũthiomi rwitũ rwa bũrũri witũ. Mwahota gũkorwo mũnjũĩ nĩ niĩ mũtaũri wa matigari ma Njirũngĩ na mabuku marĩa ma ciana ma njamba nene, na kĩhumo kĩa wĩra ũcio wothe ndahotire kũruta nĩ wĩra ũcio mwambĩrĩirie Kamĩrĩĩthũ. Koguo nĩ ndamũcokeria ngatho kuma ngoro yakwa ndikĩru handũ harikĩru mũno. No tũtanamba gũthiĩ na mbere no nyende kũririkana arĩa mathiĩte, arĩa marutire wĩra ũcio nao na tũtirĩ nao rĩu tondũ nĩ mathire. Tũmaririkane ona tũgĩthiaga na mbere na kũruta wĩra ũyũ. Rĩu nĩ ngũcoka kwaria na rũthiomi nĩgetha andũ arĩa angĩ twĩnao mahote ona gũtũthikĩrĩria, no niĩ ndĩraruta wĩra gũthikĩrĩria andũ ũrĩa marĩhotaga kwaranĩria na thiomi ici ciothe nĩgetha tũhote kũiguana hamwe, kana twĩ cukuru, kana twĩ matũũra-inĩ, kana twĩ rũraya, kana tũrĩ ageni tacio tũrarutithania wĩra nao. So in brief, I would like to thank you all very much for giving me this opportunity to speak at the University of Nairobi, which is my home in a very strange way. I feel at home there, although I've never studied there, but I feel like Kamirithu that the University of Nairobi has had a very big influence on my life as a literary scholar and as a translator. And I'll translate very briefly what I said in Kikuyu because I want to speak and I don't have very many minutes to say the few points that I do want to say about translation, that the moment of Kamirithu was historically and globally transformative, not only to the community in Kamirithu, but also to the community of Kyany'a and internationally. Kamirithu is studied and spoken about extensively in scholarship and in practice. It has informed the use of space and performance and community engagement and the relationships of power that involve space, language, hierarchies that we know in our country, and as was very well depicted by the research update from Professor Kenny Coopers and Kitata. So my own life has followed a strange avenue resulting from that work. I hadn't actually started translating Matigari when I was caught up in London when the trial of Dedan Kimathi was being performed in London. And many of you will remember that Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o was that's when his exile began, around the performance of that trial of Dedan Kimathi. But also he had come to receive a prize and then he was told it's better for him not to go back. So he ended up being here in, I'm actually speaking from London, but he was here in London after that. So what happened is that he then performed the trial of Dedan Kimathi and I was on my way home, having been a student in the UK. And I just passed by the theatre to say goodbye. And as it so happens, my destiny was changed by that play because they asked me to help them to sing some of the songs that had been probably sung at Kamirithu, and they needed a Kikuyu speaker for the international theatre from all over the world to teach them to sing some of the songs, which I personally didn't know, but I learned and I was able to teach the cast. So although I'm not a thespian, I got a very deep, a sharp reawakening into the power of theatre in engaging with people. And that's really how my engagement with all the processes of democracy, of exile, and of the power of culture began, and it impacted my scholarship, which is also on translation. And I spent most of my life looking at how translation can be used to empower these spaces so that we speak and act and live in a harmonious way, that we can break these barriers, just like we saw the colonial plantation in the images of Kamirithu. There are lines like that railway line, linguistic lines dividing us, that we are not able to engage in ways which can be very deep and meaningful, which makes this very exciting for me to see our elders in the university and us searching them respectfully, and for us to learn from them. As you heard, the thespians said, we know a lot, we learned a lot from that process themselves. So that knowledge is there for the young people. And unfortunately, as you can see, 47 years have passed and not as much has been done, but more can be done. I also wanted to reflect something that Joy said, hello Joy, and everybody else, about the cultural policy of Kenya, and to just highlight that there is a Vision 2063, which is the Africa we want. And actually Joy used that phrase, which is what was used to title Africa Vision 2063. And there is the chapter 5, which talks about the African Renaissance and the question of culture and the question of languages is embedded in that wonderful chapter 5 that our Pan-African leaders. So we have the framework in Kenya and in Africa to do this work without fear. And what's more exciting is, since devolution, we have even greater impetus to do these things locally. And there are young people and people from the communities themselves who are advocating for themselves, but it's very important for them to see that they're coming from struggles that people have not as yet been able to breach these spaces and transform them in the way that was envisaged by our liberations, our vision and our dreams and our parents' dreams of liberation. But I want to say that as I work through these terms such as decolonization, I think they don't belong so much with us because we're not a colony, and we're trying, as Joy has said, to figure out how, since we have lived in this post-colonial space now for about 60 years, how can we enrich this reality so that we have or living in the kind of shadow of that colonial vision. So for Renaissance, and I really am excited about the use of space and architecture, and currently I'm even interested in immersive digitalization, which can help us to recoup the past and re-envision the future. And I would very much like to be one of the visitors at the GoDown when I'm back home to see how the exciting work that that's being done. So I'm really excited, and also the work at the university. Maya Angelou reminds us that our price has been paid, so we can dream and imagine whatever we want. In reality, we don't have to ask for permission, but of course we need money. So this whole idea of infrastructure is really, really important because it tells the story of how far we have come. Just seeing those settlements, they tell us the story of where and how far we've come in those 60 years of independence, and even in those 47 years from Kamirithu. So I'm interested personally, theoretically, and in reality in restorative justice through creativity by transforming the infrastructure, because we have the know-how, we have the materials, even if it's made of, as Auma Obama told us, even if it's made of the local materials, even if it's made from mud, even if it's made of gold, we have the material wealth to change and transform our environment as we transform our mindset, because all these things are linked. And on the research and the university and community and international and global collaboration, I am really excited because the diaspora, I'm from the diaspora now, and of course I'm Kenyan, and it is also good to see these vast chains and linkages that we can make. Germany, for example, itself was a colonial country, and it has its own ghosts and so I'm concerned about how we work in these international spaces, particularly around ethics and around translation. How do we hear each other, not just even across the divide from Kamiriithu to Nairobi, to Kenya, to London, to New York, to Switzerland, to Germany. How do we hear each other? Because we are living in different time and material spaces. And so whatever comes out of this will be a translation. The more we can engage the Kenyan communities, the East African communities, the African American communities, and their experiences, and the indigenous communities like who have had colonial experiences like ourselves, then we can envision a future, which is why, like the work of Wangeshi Mutu, looking at Afrofuturism, those kinds of works also become very important. But I don't want to jump ahead of myself because we are still at the research stage, but to end and to conclude that with the idea of continuing to search for this freedom, to continue to search. It's a journey. It's not a destination. And we have to keep striving to undo the past, to survive the present, and to create the future, but also imagine it beyond what the colonial and post-colonial limitations have provided for us. that we need to go beyond that and dream and dream and dream. And we in Kenya have everything, technology, young people who are so exciting and so informed that I'm very optimistic about the physical project, but also Kenya affords us enough physical space to live culturally looking forward. I also did want to talk about intersectionality, and I really like the way that the GoDown is reimagining space and taking into account gender, disability, the urban spaces where poor people live and working class people live, which are often forgotten in the discourse of culture, which is considered in many societies as a high place of being. So I advocate for translation, that we must engage in ways that are not excluding those people, and that we don't have linguistic, technological, and intellectual barriers, that we find translational ways to simplify things so that, or to make things sophisticated as the institutions require. I think this is a good point at which to stop. And I would like to thank you so much for having me. Ninashukuru sana wakati huu, asanteni sana.
Thank you very much, Professor Wagoro, for that insightful presentation. Now we want to invite the next panelist. That's James Kiviga. I hope you are here. Please.
Ukaina haha andũ a Kamĩrĩĩthũ. Kamĩrĩĩthũ wote waje hapa. Na mwathĩke. Athĩkai. Yuhai. Wicia nĩ mũnogire mũno. Ukai haha. Ukai. Kabankorwo ngiarie ndĩ mbere yanyu no mũkorwo mwĩyũrĩte haha. Jiriri karibu tu. Ukacu. Niĩ ngwaria na Gĩkũyũ.
I'm going to speak in Kikuyu.
Tondũ Gĩthũngũ nĩ kĩario kĩingĩ mũno.
There has been too much English, so.
Koguo ekei tugarurire hanini tondu ona Ngaahika Ndeenda yandikitwo na Gĩkũyũ.
So we need to change a bit because after all, even Ngaahika Ndeenda is in Kikuyu.
Ona maitũ njugĩra no yo yari na mĩtukanio ya ndũrĩrĩ ciothe cia Kenya.
And Maito Njugera was was in many languages, a collection of different languages from Kenya.
Koguo rĩrĩa tũkwaria Gĩkũyũ haha mũmenye tũrĩ o Gĩkũyũ-inĩ.
Just know, as we speak Kikuyu here, we are okay. We are in a good place because, you know, the language can be translated.
Rĩu niĩ ngwenda kwaria ndeto nyinyi ciĩgiĩ ũrĩa twambĩrĩirie Ngaahika Ndeenda.
I just talk briefly about how we began Ngaahika Ndeenda.
Nĩ gwathire ũguo gũgĩtuĩka harĩa social hall yarĩ ĩgĩtuĩka yarĩ kĩndũ ĩka kenda, na tondũ nĩ yakũrĩrĩire nginya ĩkambia kũinama kũgwa, mũtumia wetagwo Mrs. Amon niwe wathire kwĩ Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o, na ndĩragwĩta ũguo kũringana na ũrĩa Ngũgĩ acokaga gũtwĩra thutha tũgĩthaka. Gũgĩtuĩka nĩ tũgitĩre kĩwanja kĩu kĩa ĩka kenda gĩtige gwakwo nĩ andũ arĩa matarĩ na wako.
Okay, so where Kamirithu was, there was a plot of about 9 acres that was being run down. And a certain lady went to Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o and said, can we do something so that this land is not encroached or the space misused?
Nake na agĩtĩkĩra na makĩnyitana na athuri angĩ arĩa businessmen a Kamĩrĩĩthũ ona arĩa marutaga wĩra gũkũ Nairobi magĩcokanĩrĩra, na ndĩragwĩta ciugo cia Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o,
And so he accepted, and together with some businessmen in Nairobi and some elders in Kamirithu, they started to carry out the project.
Ya Kamiriithu o atumia makiuria mbere ya twambĩrĩirie gwĩciria ũhoro wa gwaka we Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o na we Ngũgĩ wa Mirii, tondũ Ngũgĩ wa Mirii nĩguo athomithagia gĩthomo kĩa andũ aya akũrũ. Makĩrwo tũcarie ithako tũthiage narĩo na mbere o tũgĩciragia ũrĩa tũkwambĩrĩria mwaka ũcio.
So before even the building happened, they decided that they needed to already have something to do, a play. So they told Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o and Ngũgĩ wa Mirii, who was at that time teaching in an adult education in the area, to bring them a play, something that they can already be working on.
Na hau niho Ngaahika Ndeenda yokĩire, tondũ Ngũgĩ wa Mirii na Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o maikarire thĩ na magĩthondeka ithako rĩu.
That is the genesis of Ngaahika Ndeenda.
Ithuĩ rĩrĩa twagĩtirwo twathiĩ o mũndũ twarĩ andũ aingĩ mũno makĩria ma magana merĩ gũthiĩ na igũrũ, no nĩ twacokire tũgĩtigwo gĩkundi kĩnini ta igana rĩa kĩndũ, na tũgĩcoka tũgĩthiĩ andũ makĩgũaga amwe makona matirakenio nĩ ũũ kana ũũ, tondũ nĩ mekuga niĩ ndĩ wa kanitha mũna na nĩ ndaigua ta kanitha yahutio hau, angĩ makauga ndĩ wĩra hana nĩ ngũingatwo ũguo, tũgĩthiĩ nginya tũgĩtigara rĩu matigari marĩa matigarire.
Okay, we started as a very large group, over 200, but gradually some people dropped off for various reasons. Some of them quoted reasons to do with church, others job, others social reasons. So eventually they remained a specific number, fewer than the initial, about 100, and they soldiered on until the end.
Nĩ twakĩambĩrĩria ithako rĩu na hĩndĩ ĩyo nĩ 1977 na tukiambĩrĩria na ithako rĩgĩthiĩ na mbere, ona tũgĩkorwo twĩna andũ merutĩire magatũhe indo cia band, orchestra yarĩ ya hinya mũno, na icio ciothe nĩ andũ marutaga na tũkaigua mũno tũrateithio nĩ gũkũ university.
Okay, so they worked and they got support from different people. They had a band, an orchestra. The university also, according to the way it was at the time, they felt if the University of Nairobi was giving them support.
Nĩ twateithĩrĩirio mũno. No, rĩrĩa twambĩrĩirie gũthaka, no twambĩrĩirie kuona maũndũ, tondũ kĩama kĩakĩrĩ kĩmwe mwena wa thirikari, na tũkĩambĩrĩria kũigua hena tũciũko tũroka ũguo, tũtireka wega, ũrĩa mekuga nĩ tũreka ũru, nĩ tũrathomithia andũ gũkararia, no ithuĩ tuonaga arĩ wega mũno twekaga, tondũ handũ hau nĩ harokagwo thaa igĩrĩ ũgakora andũ nĩ makinyĩte, na nyĩmbo ciambĩrĩria kũhũrwo andũ magoka kwa wingi mũno, na gũtirĩ wanogaga. Okay,
so there was a lot of commitment even from the community. People would come daily to participate, but then over time it became a bit politically sensitive, and they started hearing issues about questioning of what was happening, and but they themselves were encouraged and they worked and they were happy about what they were doing.
Nĩ twathire ũguo tũgĩcoka tũgĩkora mũthenya ũmwe tũthiĩte tũgĩkora tũkĩrwo nĩ ngathĩti irauga tũtigakorwo twĩ hau, nĩ twahingĩrwo ithako nĩ ndithi kuumaga Kiambu.
Then one day they were told that there has been a notice that the play has been closed and they should not assemble there.
Tũcokete gũthikĩrĩria rĩ Ngũgĩ agĩikio detention.
Okay, then of course soon after that, Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o was detained.
Rĩu ithuĩ tũgĩtuĩka nĩ twamaka na tũgĩcoka gũthikĩrĩria nginya mawĩra-inĩ ũkaigua nĩ mũndũ nĩ tũronerwo mawĩra-inĩ mbata arĩa marutaga ũguo ũkaigua nĩ tũramakio kũmakio kwenderio guoya.
Okay, after that there followed a season of fear, threats and intimidation.
No, tũtiaikarire mũno nĩguo gwacokire gwĩtuĩka mũthamaki nĩ ahurũka nake ũrĩa wacokire tũgĩkorwo tũgakinya 1982 gũkĩgĩa kuu thirikari yendaga kũgarũrwo no ndĩakĩgarũrirwo. Oho ũrĩa wagĩtũũra rĩkĩrĩ ho nĩ arekereria Ngũgĩ nake Ngũgĩ gũka agĩũka ningĩ na ithako rĩngĩ.
Okay, after, Ngũgĩ was detained and then eventually released, and when he was released from detention, he came back with another play.
Na rĩu tũkĩrĩikarĩra thĩ no tondũ harĩa twathakagĩra harĩ hathũku stage yenyewe ĩgakorwo wakinya ĩkahoboka nĩ yabuthĩte.
Okay, by that time, the theater had really been run down. The stage itself was even dangerous. You'd step on it and it would collapse.
Tũtikĩũra Ngũgĩ arire na gũkũ university na tũkĩheo theater 1 tũgathakĩra kuo tũma gũka Kamirithu tũgoka gũkũ theater 1 theater 2 ũguo na tũgĩka rehearsal cia hinya mũno gũkũ no indo tũreka rehearsal icio rĩ theater 1 kana theater 2 icio rĩ itingĩganĩire andũ arĩa makoragwo mokĩte kuona tũgĩka rehearsals.
So they came here and were doing rehearsals in ED1, ED2, but the space was not even enough for all the people who used to come to watch their rehearsals, not even the performances.
Kumbe hĩndĩ ĩyo kũrĩ o andũ angĩ maroka magagũthigana na magagĩtwara ndeto kũrĩa maratwara. Nĩ twakorirwo tũrĩhĩirwo National Theatre tondũ twekaga rehearsals tũthiĩ National Theatre. Na nĩ twakoretwo tũrĩhĩirwo National Theatre makĩria ma shows makĩria ma ta 70.
Okay, we then had bookings to perform in the National Theatre, several shows, even up to, like maybe 20 or above.
Nare, hĩndĩ ĩyo kũu National Theatre, gũkũ university, kũu nĩkuo tuonagĩra andũ arĩa mokaga gũtũ support. Na kũu nĩkuo ndamenyeire andũ ta Kũigua Mwere na ũyũ wa Naikuru. Nĩ tuge nĩ mokaga MPs na magatũrĩhĩra.
Okay, so we got a lot of support even from various politicians. They would even come, pay for us and give us a lot of support.
No, rĩrĩa tuokire dress rehearsal gũkũ National Theatre, twakorire gũkabĩtwo nĩ thigari iria i mahiga iria ciĩkagĩra nguo njirũ na ngari irathiũrũrũka hau ũguo tũkĩrwo kũu tũtiratonya.
But eventually when we came for the dress rehearsal, we came and found the whole National Theatre area covered by police presence, armed, and we were not allowed to get in.
Kuma hau tũkĩmenya bũrũri-inĩ ingĩ nĩ wathũka. Rĩrĩa rĩa mbere Ngaahika Ndeenda nĩ twagirio tũthake. Rĩrĩ nĩ rĩngĩ nĩ twagirio tũthake. Na by the way hĩndĩ ĩyo twarorete Zimbabwe makĩheo wĩyathi.
Okay, by that time our plan, or we were thinking of going to Zimbabwe.
Invitation yarĩ nene mũno.
Or they had an invitation to Zimbabwe to celebrate their Independence Day.
Kwoguo matanya maitũ mothe mathirĩire hau. Tũngĩathire na maitũ Njugĩra, tũngĩathire na Dedan Kimathi the trial, no tũtiathire ningĩ tũkĩhingĩrwo
The plan had been to go and perform Maito Jugera, to go and perform the Trial of Dead and Kimathi, but unfortunately, none of that came to be.
Netumete haraya na nginya riu na tutire twakua ngoro.
We have traveled a long journey, but we have never given up.
No tukoragwo tukiuga muthenya omwe no ugoka mathako macio meri andu a Kamirithu magathaka mathako macio meri na ngwiciria tondu ri turonire andu a guturugamirira haha.
Now we still believe that a time will come when the Kamirithu players, these ones here, will still perform. Right now, this is a good day because we see that these scholars here are here and they are supporting us.
Ngakera kumwira atiriri Mũgĩkũyũ augaga utamerithitie ndatiga kuhanda.
A proverb, a Kikuyu proverb says, if what you planted has not germinated and grown, you don't stop trying. You have to keep planting.
Na nikio riu twi haha noguo murona tuigana haha twari aingi muno no na mbaire nene niri ekuite.
Sadly, very many of us have already actually passed away, but we are still here.
Na aria angi makonja ni ukuru kana ni mawira maria manaruta maritu.
Others have become impaired either because of age or just poor health.
No riri gicokia ngatho nyambe njuge mutumia wa Ngũgĩ Nyambura wa Ngũgĩ ni umwe ithu twagiriirwo ni kumuririkana muno tondu niwe wampire gutucariria uria tungithaka ona tuhingiirwo akirwa nginya tukiona twi Gikuyu tugithakira kuo kirabu.
Okay, they want to recognize in a very special way Nyambura, Ngũgĩ's wife, because she supported them a lot and actually found for them a place to go and do a performance at Kikuyu.
Toguo wiki he muthuri ugwitwo Shoru wa Muiruri kana Kioi wa Kanoru. Nake muthuri ucio ni arutire wira munene muno na no muhaka tukamucokeria ngatho kuma riria ambiriirie gutucariria ni kutuguthie riu ni twanyita momentum twi guku Gikuyu na tukiuga ni ciigana kuu tukiambiriria riu kwiyumia nja tutongoretio ni Shoru na akiruta wira munene muno na no tumuririkanaga ono muthi Shoru ndari aturikio na riu.
Okay, also there's another man that they would like to really recognize. I'm not getting the name very clearly. Shoru wa Moirori. Yeah. Yes, because he too supported them very much and gave them a lot of momentum.
Na twakena muno ona aya matigarite tugakorwo twi nao o twerana ni tucemaniei gutiri hindi twiranaga ni tucemaniei na tukaga gucemania ona umuthi ni mwakiona ni kwaraniria hari umite kuraya uyu umite kundu gugwitwo Ngorika kurugama Gathoni uyu niwe wari kairitu gakwa ka mbere getagwo Gathoni kari karemi niko kaumite ona Ikuru ndigetaga gaka tondu kari o kairitu gakwa.
Now let me just translate that. He played the role of Kigonda, and the lady who just stood there played the role of Gathoni, the daughter.
The daughter. Leu ukona maundu macio ari oku na Ikuru kumuhurira thimu tu ugoka tugacemania kiboko na aya ngiothe na mutumia wa Shoru rugama mutumia wa Shoru ucio niwe mutumia wa Shoru nake akaumona Ikuru ni bahati kana ni Luasubukia na Ikuru na ni okuona riria twauga tucemanie ni ekwirutira kuma kuu agoka ku haha twina kwisha Okay, mutigake make, no turiona ringira no ndimuhe ndeto. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bwana Kithiga and your team. We wish we could give you the whole afternoon. Tungewapatia mchana wote mutuelezee kuhusu Kamirithu. Tunawashukuru sana kwa kazi mliofanyia taifa na ukereketwa wenu ambao umetupatia changamoto kama wasomi. I want to invite okay, somebody wants to say something briefly.
I want to greet you all. I was not participating in that play. I was too young, as you can tell. But being young didn't leave me aside, because my husband, Ngũgĩ wa Mirii, I'm the wife of Ngũgĩ wa Mirii. As you were told, he started teaching literacy classes. Yeah. And among the students was my mother. So I had somebody who had several hats. I have so many. I have my mother who was a dancer. I have my husband who was a writer and continued to do that even when we escaped to Zimbabwe. We did escape to Zimbabwe. For 25 years, I was there. And I was an actress in the next play, Mother Sing for Me, as a main character, actually, one of the main characters. I might be taught by somebody whom we were, you know, main characters together. So I just wanted to say that I took part in this play in a different way. Through my mother, through my husband as the co-writer and producer of the play. I think that's all.
Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you so much. Actually, it was a very interesting. I wish we had put you on the panel, because you have given us a new dimension. It's becoming sweeter and sweeter, and the time is becoming shorter and shorter. So please bear with us. We have two last presenters whom I will request to just give us a sneak preview of their presentation. They should not take more than 10 minutes combined, because time is not on our side. We are online and we are timed. So at exactly 4:30, the Zoom will be off. So we'll be left talking to ourselves. So Brian, Mathenge, and Mutanu, Kyany'a, I think all of you should just come here. And then just like Dr. Kitata and Professor Coopers were speaking, you can engage ourselves in that manner. Brian and Kyany'a. Kyany'a, where are you? Yeah, please. Please just take strictly 5 minutes each. And yeah. You can. All right. Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much. I am Brian from the Social Justice Centers. I am here on various I think I'm the person who will go with a lot of takeaways from here, because at the Social Justice Centers, it's an organ of the modern activists, and the present activists, basing having in mind that the country, as we speak, is in a glaring political crisis. And I think we are very inspired from the transitions in, that we have witnessed over the years. So myself is to say that with me, I have Minocha, who comes from the Social Justice Center's Traveling Theater. Maybe you can even come and share revolutionary oxygen in the short time that we have. Please, Mino. And then I'll just say very short points, because time is also not on our side. And let me say that these intellectual contributions that Coopers and Kitata have contributed. I was avoiding Makau because I think many people have that confusion of Makau Mutua and Makau Kitata, because I don't know why. But let me say that this brings me to the point that intellectuality in a today world should be transformed, you know, in changing the conditions of the people. And I think that is what Daktari and Coopers have done. And let me say that history, as we were reminded by our former, those who came before us, is that history first is that, history is a vehicle. And second is that history is a weapon. And so it is us intellectuals who we have a role, and we can tell this from the former contributions and scholars like Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o, the Kamirithu original cast, who we still keep, getting inspirations from. And I think it is very important that my former speakers have addressed the questions of preserving these historical struggles, because they are very important to us. And I think past this documentation, we must move to treating history as an actionable force. And let me say that the theater now is acts as a very great weapon in expressing, the form of people power. And that is why we have the theater. You just say something very short, and then
I will speak both in Swahili and English. Sorry for those who will not understand, but I try to make it easy for all of us to be on the same page. So my name is Minocha. I am a grassroots organizer from Mukuru Community Justice Center, but I also lead the Social Justice Center's Traveling Theater. The Social Justice Traveling Theater is a community-based theater that consists of members from different social justice centers. We have 20 social justice centers that are all based in informal settlements. So what we do, our members are also like very similar to what our brothers from, not brothers, our comrades from Ngaahika Ndeenda, what they were doing. And also our formation is also like really very similar. And what they were doing is also really very similar with what we do, because our shows are mostly street theaters. We go to the streets to perform. For example, go to Dandora to address the issue of maybe the dam site and all that, which we have found it really very relatable to communities, because just sitting people down and, giving them dialogues and all that has become very, very difficult in informal settlements because of these handouts that tumefundishwa sana na NGOs. So ukiita mtu umpe revolutionary ideology inakuwa ngumu sana kwa sababu kama atapata kitu kidogo. So we found it really very necessary for us to be able to go to the communities penye watu wako. So that is where we go, and that is where we mostly do our performances. I will finish by saying, because I had planned to say this, that it has become extremely difficult for the theater to be able to fundraise during these neoliberal times, because mostly it is attacked by corporates, like what Ngaahika Ndeenda happened the other day in KNT. It's only those people who could afford it wangeweza kuwatch, sindio? So it is very difficult for us to, take it to the grassroots and act there, kwa sababu hapo ndio masses wako, hapo ndio mental slavery iko. And Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o talks about, addresses the issue of mental slavery that is promoted by religion. Na hapo ndio tunapata makanisa mingi sana ziko huko, watu wanaendelea kukuwa na a lot of mental slavery, lakini hawawezi afford kukuja kuwatch Ngaahika Ndeenda hapa hivi kionyeshano na 1200, right? So we have found it very necessary for us to be doing these things in informal settlements where the people are, where mental slavery imejaa sana. So like what my comrades said, intellectuality should be able to, contribute to conscientizing the masses.
Yeah, please.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mutanu. Thank you for sticking through the time. My name is Mutanu. I work for African Digital Heritage. And as I'm standing here and part of an organization that believes in the power of digitization and in the freedom that digitization gives us, I am here in awe of what we have been able to achieve today till this moment. Because in this very moment, you have seen, it's an archive of sorts, because I am sure this video can be referred to 50 years from now, and that is the power of digitization. You have seen Miri's wife come and tell her side of the story to people who are as far as London, and that is the power and freedom that digitization gives us. So yes, we work at African Digital Heritage. Could you please make it a little bit bigger or zoom in? So our work at African Digital Heritage, basically, we say that we traverse storytelling, culture, and technology, and try to transect what these three tenets bring to us. And so here the power that we have seen in our work is that digitization helps us in adding the voices of multiple stakeholders. Before now, from my understanding, is that the role of Kamirithu theater and the plays had always been recorded from like Ngũgĩ's point of view and Miri's point of view and other academicians. But now today we have seen other perspectives of it. So as when Kenny and Makau reached out to us, they asked us to help simulate what Kamirithu theater looked like. If you're familiar with Kenya's history, you'll realize that in an attempt to erase the stories of our struggle and also to erase the stories of maybe how our governments had been failing us even after independence, we had this precedence of I don't want to say the word eradicating. We had this precedence of destroying spaces that were very important to us, and in its place, building like schools and churches and stuff. And that is the same thing that happened at Kamirithu. So to be able to push this conversation forward and to also invite Kenyans to interact with it, we decided to do a 3D simulation of the space. Could you please go to the third slide? Yeah. So the part of the process, really, we borrowed from Kamirithu and what was at the tenet of who they were, which was co-creation. As they were recapping how the play was done, they said that a woman went to Ngũgĩ. And Professor Coopers and Makau also came to us and asked us that we work together to do this. So in the first step, we looked at what had been written before from like academia and in books and in photos that we had. Next slide, please. And in photos that we had, and also from, so we came up with a draft one. So, but from the challenges that we experienced in the draft one was that one, we didn't have so many photos to refer to. There were just a few. And also some of the photos were not like really good quality because of how they had been preserved before. And we weren't really sure about like the dimensions and also the creation of the theater in itself, because the depictions were more of like from a narrative point of view than a descriptive point of view. Next slide, please. So this was draft one from what we garnered from now the secondary sources. But as you can see, and as the community, so after we created this, Makau went back to the community. Again, it is a very co-creative process. They went back to the community and asked them, was this really how the theater looked like? And then we got feedback. So one of the feedback was, you see the space from here to here, that we should enlarge it, because some part of the play involved like a scene where the Mau Mau were fighting with the Kikuyus, and so there had to be a huge space. And then something else that they said was that there were no seats here, but rather a large space to allow for like orchestra. But just to mention that this, again, had been created from secondary sources. And if you remember from Makau's presentation, there was this photo of a matchbox recreation. So we then came and did a second draft. Next slide, please. Yeah, we then came and did a second draft. And as you can see, lifted the stage a little bit more and allowed for more space between where the first person sits and where the stage sits. And also we had to change the simulation of the materials used in the theater because it was a mix of bamboo. Yeah, it was a mix of bamboo and timber as the customer. I can see the cast members nodding. Thank you very much. Yeah, and then after that, we still had to go through another process because we got feedback that from what we had depicted, we didn't give it a bird's eye view. So yeah, next slide, please. Which led us to draft 3. And before draft 3, I have to mention that they also gave us feedback that it might be necessary to come to UON and see their theater at ED2 where they used to practice, because they say they borrowed the design for Kamirithu from there. And so I came, took photos, and then we worked again on the simulation and had this. This was now our draft 3. Now, because we weren't really familiar with the terrain of the place and the terrain at that time, we got feedback that we need to change the terrain at the back of the theater to make it a little bit low and also include tea leaves on some sides, which now brought us to draft 4. Last slide. And so this was like the final simulation. I can show you a video walkthrough of what we were able to create together. We did this in months, please remember, because there's a lot of back and forth and a lot of co-creation between secondary sources, the professors themselves, members of the cast, and just trying to reflect what everyone remembers of how the theater looked like. Next slide, and then play the video. Yeah, play the video. Oh, it's not playing. Could you please scroll down, and there's like a link somewhere here. If you can click watch on YouTube and then see if it shows. Okay, I'll I'll see how we can navigate that. If you go to africandigitalheritage.org and look under projects, you will find something around the reconstruction of Kamirithu. So that's African Digital Heritage /projects. Yeah, it's just been put up today as our most current project. So now what next? We are creating the digital archive of Kamirithu, right? We are inviting people to interact with these simulations. We're interacting people. We hope that these simulations will ignite talks on experiences, just as we have heard from the wife of Ngũgĩ Mirii today. We ask that the youth, when you go back home, just ask your parents, were you fortunate enough to see this amazing play? And what did it feel like then? For the people at Ndeya and for the people at Kamirithu, what was life like then? Like we need to invite people to document these pieces just to grow the archive of Kamirithu and the theater and its influence in the Kenyan space. We also hope that from what we have done today and from what is being documented and from this research, that we invite more people to research on the subject and research on the power of digital storytelling and research on the power of community participation and co-creation and stuff like that. Yeah, But above all, we are cognizant that digitization is not, we are cognizant that digitization is not a one-step process, that it is an incremental process. And it is because of this that it helps preserve the communities. I want to say oomph. It preserves what it is about the community and also brings in buy-in from the community. So yes, interact with the oh, they want to show you the simulation. Interact with this as much as you can, share it with everybody, and we hope that this will ignite more recollections about this space that is so influential when we come to telling the story of post-independence Kenya. Yes, this is the walkthrough. Full screen, please. You can start again and then full screen. It doesn't have sound. Yeah, so this is the, there was a perimeter around the theater, and then the cast members told us that there was a seating of about a maximum of about 3,000 people. And then, as they said, it only had 3 columns, and you can see the bird's eye view and the 3 to 4 steps that will get you on the stage, and maybe the store at the back of the stage where they used to change from what we gathered. And something else that we caught on was that children would climb on the trees to catch a glimpse of the play. So it was important for us to also depict that around the theater, there were trees. But above all, I hope we did it justice.
I want to invite us to give a hearty clap to all our panelists, those who are on site and those who are online, and also to give a hearty clap to ourselves, both who are here and those also who are online. But I want to invite somebody to do it in style. There's a gentleman here who knows how to do it in style, and he's called Fred, and he knows himself. I invite Fred to help us to appreciate our panelists and ourselves for making this day a lively afternoon. We have moved into the evening, and I know it is going to be even more lively when we move to the question and answer section. So Fred, as Fred comes, allow me to just say one word to all the panelists that without you, this afternoon and this early evening would not have been what it is. I've just run through comments online and they are wow. Yeah, please, Fred, lead us in appreciating the panelists and the audience.
Okay, thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Fred. I've just been ambushed. And I think we can do a factorial clap. Actually, we can actually stand. So I had mentioned that we are going to do a factorial clap, but I'm going to disqualify that since we are standing. We can do like 2 claps. Around the stomach area, and then we can do 2 using our feet. I think we can do some justice, okay? So we can practice first. We can do on. Then with our foot. Oh, yeah, with our foot, not with our hands. Okay, you did well. So let's do 1 to go. Thank you so much. Feel appreciated. So I think we have captured everybody. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Asante sana, Fred. I ambushed you and I knew why I ambushed you. You are one of the brightest guys we have around. So I knew you'll do it on your feet. I want to spend the next, I'm advised by Dr. Kitata that the ICT have allowed us another 30 minutes to be here. So we can divide it between ourselves and the online audience. So we spend the next 15 minutes engaging ourselves here, and then we invite the online audience for the last 15 minutes. Or would you want us to do it the reverse way? Huh? We mix. Okay, but we can pick like 2, 3 from here, and then we go to the online audience. So the first 3 questions or concerns to the panelists from the on-site audience. Do we have any? Please come. If you have any issue, the first 3 guys, you can come in front so that you pick the microphone. You need to appear on our screen. We are recording. So please come over. There is a gentleman, is it a gentleman over there? Please come over. The next person wants to raise an issue or ask a question. Okay, you be, oh, Dean, please, welcome. Professor Ome, our Dean Emeritus, Faculty of Arts.
Thank you. My question, first I want to appreciate all. It's wonderful to meet all of you, the original cast and everybody else. I'm happy to see you. But I'm also wondering whether the department can also arrange so that we can have some of those original acts, like Ngaahika Ndeenda presented to us here at the university. And if there is any remuneration coming from it, like people paying or anything, then it should go to the original cast. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dean Emeritus, for that particular advice. I think the chair is here. She is the AIE holder. We will put that concern to her. It has gone to the right office. May we have the next, utusamehe tunaongea kizungu mingi, lakini utatuia radhi. Yeah, tafadhali.
I might not be very good in English, but I'm not also very poor. Hamjambo. Oh, my name is Peter Ndongo. I'm the chair of Kamirithu Juakali Association. I've just stand here to tell you something about the name. Why did we choose Kamirithu Juakali? We wanted to keep the fire burning that was started by Thiong'o. As the chair of Kamirithu Juakali Association, I interact with other readers. And one of the things I always ask me, when I mention Kamirithu Juakali, they always ask me, is that the place of Thiong'o? So our dream of making the name Kamirithu on the world map, I'm sure we want to keep the fire burning. That is why we choose Kamirithu Juakali Association. If you go to the Google and go to micro and small enterprises and you Google, you will get Kamirithu Juakali as the reading Juakali in the Republic of Kenya. You will be shocked to see some of the things that are being done by those people. You won't believe they are being done by just the ordinary people. And I tell you something about Kamirithu Juakali. You know the word Juakali, those people who understand, it was purely, it was a derogatory name to demon. The word Juakali, haikuwa jina mzuri. Even when we are talking, you say, hii ni kitu ni ya Juakali. But today, let me tell you, Juakali, hiyo ni jiwa boy likawataliwa. But today, that is where the whole world is going. Back to the Juakali, to the informal sector. And I get with you guys at the university. Would like you just to pay a visit and see what is being done by those people, which were inspired by Thiong'o. Thank you very much. And I'm very happy. I never came to the university, but today I'm addressing students at the university, including lecturers and students. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I know we are beginning. Could we have another, please, come and take the microphone. Prof, you introduce yourself. People need to know you also. Yes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Garnet Odwocholunya, and I'm with the GoDown Art Center, but with St. Paul's University as well, where I'm adjunct. Now, going into Limuru and confessing that I did watch the play Ngaahika Ndeenda in Kikuyu Country Club a while back, and the atmosphere was electric. Thank you so much, cast. I remember it very clearly. Now, on the way here today with Joy, I just kept wondering, because of course, Ngũgĩ started with a cast and they were responding to Bata. Now, I partly grew up in Limuru at Bata. And so I kept wondering, what is the situation? Because, we always talk about this Czech Canadian company that did all these things that the cast responded to, and many of them were working at the company. And one of the things, of course, is that today there's actually an African woman, boss at Bata. And I wondered if it had made any difference that we now have a Kenyan